Good morning. I am excited to be here for my Tuesday Facebook Live. Was not here last week due to a Jewish holiday. Today I want to talk about emotions. I've been hit with waves of emotions of my own over the past week or so, and I got a call from a man yesterday who was also struggling with an intense overload of emotion on his own. Now, the emotions that sometimes are the most dangerous are those ones that stem from the places where we tell ourselves we have no value, where those monkey minds, that self-critical voice, that drive inside of us that just beats us up, just takes a stick to our shoulders and just won't stop beating us. Those are some of the emotions that are the most difficult. Other emotions like sadness, like fear, anxiety, self-doubt. These are the negative emotions, of course, that we need the most help with. And I think that one of the biggest challenges we face when we feel them, particularly as men, is that we're not allowed to have these emotions. And that if we allow them in, they're going to overwhelm us. They're going to emasculate us. They're going to basically send us to bed with no hope of ever getting out again. That was certainly my fear. And what I discovered, certainly within the last week, is that the more I fight against the feeling, and that fight can take a couple different look, it can look a couple different ways. The more I fight against that feeling, the longer the feelings remain, the more powerful they stay. So let's talk a little bit about how we fight through those feelings when we're having them, because I think a lot of men and women as well are going to connect with this. The first is to just ignore them, pretend they're not there, and to try just to say it's not, they don't matter, it doesn't exist, I don't need to deal with them, just stuff them down, go away, pretend they're not there. Now, sometimes we take very active steps in stuffing those feelings, in numbing ourselves. We can numb them in any number of addictions. We can numb them in any number of distractions. We can numb them with activity, and we can simply numb them by trying to turn off that switch in our brain. I'm thinking right now of the Book of Mormon, when one of the characters is having incredibly uncomfortable feelings. He just, and actually these are his feelings are homosexual feelings, and he's so homophobic, it's so unacceptable in his culture to be able to feel those feelings that he just turns off the switch. But he talks also about a time when he missed the death of his sister. I don't know how well you know the soundtrack for Book of Mormon, but he knew she was sick. There was a sale on a video game at the mall. He thought he could get the game and come back. But when he came back, she had already passed away, and he wasn't there for his sister's last moments. And the guilt racked him. And then in the song, he says, I just flicked a switch and turned it off. So how many times in our lives are we trying to flick that switch and turn off these incredibly difficult and painful feelings? And doesn't our heart break for that young man, that character? Now, this is an entirely fictional story, but it resonates because it is so much like so many real stories that we live day to day. How many of us have those kinds of deep regrets that we weren't there at the moment we needed to be there, that we did something wrong at the critical moment when we needed to do something else? We all have those feelings, and we, I think, are all struggling to just find a switch to turn them off. The other thing, as I mentioned, is we can find ways to anesthetize ourselves. And that can be with video games, it can be with pornography, it can be with food, with gambling, with alcohol, with substance abuse of any kind. And at a certain point, I had a man once when I'm a 12-step sponsor in the Al-Anon program, in addition to being a progress coach. And I had a man who described the kind of abuse he was subjected to as a 9-year-old, and then how once he became an adult, he lived in a van in someone's backyard for something like 27 years, drunk almost all the time. And when he described for me extent of the suffering he'd had as a little boy at the hands of bullies in his neighborhood who didn't just bully him, they sexually abused him as well. When I came to understand the amount of pain that man was in, I understood there was a logical connection to the amount of time he'd anesthetized himself. Because if you're in that much pain, I can understand, I think any human being would be able to understand the desire to make that pain go away any way we can. And so it gave me a new window into the depth of pain that our brothers and sisters around us may be feeling and their need to escape it, the depth of it. And I understand that. The pain that I'm talking about today, specifically in this live, in this Facebook and YouTube live program, is the day-to-day pain that rolls through us, or the day-to-day emotions that roll through us that aren't necessarily triggered by anything anything logical, anything rational. That we can look around and say our lives are going really well. We have tremendous freedom. We're getting almost everything that we want in our lives. And yet we still can feel like crap. Isn't that true? And that's where some of these other things that divert us from the pain come in to try and anesthetize ourselves on a daily basis. And what's the frustration with that? Well, if we're in pain and we go to, we decide to do some retail therapy, or we just lose ourselves down rabbit holes on the internet, how many hours have we lost doing that? And all of a sudden it's the end of the day and we've gotten none of the things done that we wanted to get done. So that's the risk. That's what's that's the cost here of what happens when we try and stuff down and anesthetize ourselves from that pain. The second way we might try and do it is, there's a saying, when I get busy, I get better. And that is absolutely true. There are times when we need to deselect the pain that we're feeling, the discomfort, the sadness, the anxiety, whatever it is, and just focus it on a particular action. And there have been many times for me, and I'm sure for you as well, when that has been effective. And that has worked. That's gotten me out of my self-pity party. It's gotten me off of problem island. However you want to describe it, that has been and continues to be a meaningful technique. But I want to talk also about a third option, which is to allow ourselves to feel that pain, to allow that wave to pass through us, to think about ourselves. I was at the beach the other day, and I was watching the surfers as they just ride the waves. Now, what I mean by that is not just when they catch a wave and ride it into the shore, which is of course their goal, but they're riding the waves, waiting for that wave they want to catch. And they're just letting the waves undulate under them. They go up and they go down, and they just float. They float on the waves of the ocean, waiting for the one they want to ride. I have made a commitment, particularly within the last week, for myself to let myself ride those waves of emotion when I'm starting to feel them, and let them pass through me. And sometimes they take hold of me, and sometimes they make me angry, and I overreact, or I need to yell, or I need to take a foam roller when I'm alone in my bedroom and just whap the thing on the bed. Whatever it needs to be. There was another time in my life something happened that made me so furious. I was staying in someone else's guest house. I wasn't alone. I didn't really have privacy, but I did have a bedroom, and I went into the bedroom and I just took a pillow and I held it over my face and just yelled into the pillow, just standing up or sitting, maybe on the edge of the bed, and just yelled into the pillow everything that I needed to get out about how angry I was about that situation. Interestingly, that situation was resolved within 24 hours, and what I had panicked over was not anything that really needed to be, it disappeared. It turned into a nothing. But at the moment I got the information and jumped to the conclusion that this was a disaster, I was furious, and I needed to do something with that energy. And I think that's maybe that's a minor point to talk about, is that a lot of times when we are triggered by something and we think it's fatal, we think it's overwhelming, we think it's a fatal flaw, it's a disaster, a calamity, a catastrophe. How many times have those things passed? When we get to the other side of them, we can look back and we say, oh, that wasn't as much of a big deal as I thought it was. And so when we get caught up in those emotions, they're not necessarily doing us the service we need. There are many times when our emotions are extremely effective. When we're with somebody, for instance, who's in pain, and our emotions connect with that person's pain and we can empathize with them. We have compassion, and the word compassion is made of two words. Com, which is it's a prefix meaning with, feeling, passion, their intensity. When we're with the intensity of another person and connected to them, we're actually healing that other person. We're helping that person understand they're not alone and they're connected to the world. That's the power of compassion. And feeling our emotions are very practical in that situation and important because they can connect us to another person. But there's also the times when the feelings, and there's the times when the feelings that we have can trigger us to action. Anger, channeled appropriately, becomes righteous indignation, and it can change the world. If Martin Luther King had never gotten angry, the world would look a lot different today, and the social justice strides he made may not have happened. When South Africa rose up in anger against apartheid, it changed the society, it changed their culture, it changed history. So anger, properly channeled, can be a very important and powerful feeling. Again, I want to step back and say, but what about those day-to-day feelings that just are passing through us? I heard a joke actually about meditation, about, yes, like feelings are the river and just watch the river go by. And yeah, we can make fun of it because meditation, in certain contexts may seem, we can sort of make light of it, but at a certain level, and this is one of the reasons I think meditation can be really effective, is it's true. Feelings are like a river, and we can just watch them go by. I just saw an email this morning from a friend of mine who said exactly that what emotion he's feeling right now is not necessarily the emotion he's going to feel in the next moment or the next 5 minutes or the next 10 minutes. So if we can trust our safety, our emotional safety, to say, you know what, I can stand this feeling. And that was the support that I hoped was helpful to a man who called me yesterday and said, I am so overwhelmed with emotion, with these emotions, these negative feelings, this sadness, this feeling of unworthiness, that I can't even sit at my desk and do the next thing on my to-do list. And I said, fine, can you sit and just feel that feeling and let it pass through you and know that it's not permanent, it's going to pass. And know, really, another somewhat trite but meaningful saying is, feelings are not facts. Feelings are not facts. They pass. They're not cemented into the ground, solidified and immutable. They move on. And on the other side of them are a whole new boat of feelings, many of them positive, many of them about our empowerment, our ability, the feeling of being effective in the world, the feeling of happiness, the feeling of connection. Those feelings are all on the other side of our negative feelings. So let's just experiment. That's sort of where I am right now with this. I'm experimenting on letting these feelings pass through, seeing what they're like, not fearing them, and then happily being able to move on to the other side. That's what I'm seeing happening, like a surfer waiting for his or her wave. She's going to let those undulations pass under her until she sees the break that she wants to catch. That's where I am today. Facebook Live Tuesday, 9 a.m. See you again next week. Please check out my YouTube channel where I've talked about many of these ideas as well. I have a video on compassion in particular. YouTube channel is Mark Rothman Progress Coach. And of course, my website is markcoach.net. See you again.